Hi, I'm Kesenya and welcome to today's Astro question. We are looking at a really important topic today, and it's not coming from any one person in particular, this question, and it's actually something I want to utilize in order to help people understand how I work with astrology. Now, we're going to be looking at what whole sign astrology is. Barely a week goes past for me as an astrologer where I don't get somebody saying, oh, but you've told me that my Jupiter is in the 5th house when really it's in the 4th house and you've got it wrong. Or somebody makes a comment on a YouTube video that says, how does this apply when we've got Jupiter in both the 5th house and the 4th house, and so on and so on. Lots of confusion, lots of misunderstanding, because the way I work with astrology is not the way most Western astrological teachings have been done for the last couple of 100 years. So how I work is very, very different, and therefore it is confusing to a lot of people, and I barely get, like I said, get a week go past without people commenting or wanting an explanation, or they don't understand and so on. So I thought what would be easiest is if I explain in a video how I work. So it's not so much an answer to a question, but trying to solve a problem in understanding, essentially, with this video. So let's look at whole sign astrology and what whole sign astrology is. Firstly, whole sign astrology is an ancient Hellenistic technique for assessing the houses, or creating, I should say, houses in a chart. And for those who don't know, houses are essentially realms of life in astrology. We have a house for marriage, we have a house for career, we have a house for health and well-being and children and blah, blah, blah. There is a house for every realm of life, and there are 12 of them, just like there are 12 signs. As you can see here in my wheel, we've got 12 different signs, and these are 12 different signs, and there's also 12 different houses. So Hellenistic whole sign astrology, it was established roughly 200 years BC. So it's very ancient. It's one of the earliest methods of creating houses. And I feel through my own practice and through my own observations and the teachers that I have had in astrology, that it is actually the most accurate way of interpreting the skies. And we'll get to why that is and explain how it works shortly. But it's a very different system to other house systems such as Placidus, or the more, which are the more modern ways, astrological division systems of creating houses. There's Placidus, there's Koch, there's a million of them. Perhaps not a million, but there's a lot of systems for dividing the sky into various house areas. But this one is the most ancient and, in my estimation, the most correct. I'm not going to go into all the technical detail of why I choose to utilize whole sign astrology in this video. I do plan on doing a technical webinar in the future that will explore the reasons behind utilizing whole sign astrology from a technical astronomical perspective, and also I will go into the various interpretations of division system through the time-based division systems and the space-based division systems, and why I feel the way I'm utilizing astrology works best and why it logically adds up. But that is going to be a webinar down the track, because it's far too extensive a topic to utilize in a 10-minute video for my channel at this point. Just keep an eye out in my webinars section on my website for that one coming up down the track, probably more towards the end of this year. But what I am going to do for you is explain to you how whole sign astrology works, and therefore what interpretation I'm using in my readings, and also these videos that I prepare for you online to help give you some enlightenment and understanding of this system. So I've set up Libra as being my example here. Now, if Libra was our rising sign, that essentially means, for newbies to astrology, that the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the moment of our birth was Libra. And then depending on what calculations you use, and I'll talk about this shortly, you would determine that there was something called the ascendant at a certain degree of Libra, the sign rising on the horizon in the east at the moment you were born. And let's just say that your rising ascendant degree was roughly 10 degrees here. So that would put this as your ascendant. And I'll speak about how I calculate ascendants shortly. But this might be your ascendant degree and your rising sign is Libra. Well, your rising sign in whole sign astrology actually becomes your first house, and it deals with the realm of life to do with you, your ability to thrive and survive, how you're perceived by others in the world, how you show up in the world, and your physical body, your body's journey in a physical sense through this incarnation. And in whole sign astrology, we take the entire sign of Libra to be the first house. For those who aren't aware, other schools of astrology tend to interpret the first house as starting here at the ascendant. Okay? That's how other schools of astrology work. In whole sign astrology, the first house begins here at 0 degrees of Libra. I'll write that up there, 0 degrees of Libra. That is where the first house begins, and it goes right through until 29 degrees of Libra, and that is the first house in whole sign astrology. It doesn't matter that your ascendant's at 10 degrees. It wouldn't matter if your ascendant was at 29 degrees of Libra. Libra is your first house in whole sign astrology. And because Libra is your first house, this makes Scorpio your second house. And it makes Sagittarius your third house. From 0 degrees right through to 29 degrees, that's your third house. And so on, the whole way around the horoscope. That's how whole sign astrology works. People get very confused by this, but it's really very, very simple. You're born with your rising degree, your ascendant degree in the sign of Libra. That makes Libra your first house, the whole sign of Libra, etc. Now, as you can see, because Libra, in this instance with the planets where they are, because Libra is the rising sign, it's putting the moon in the second house in this case. So there's the moon in the second house, Scorpio. And here's Jupiter in the third house, Sagittarius, and so on and so on. It puts, because this is your first house, it puts all these planets, etc., in various realms of life. The second house is resources that support our body's journey through life. Quite obviously, because it sits below the house that's about our body's journey, the second house applies to things that support us and help us through this bodily journey. It sits underneath, it's giving support to the first house. But that's a whole other topic. So I hope you can see how whole sign astrology is working through this. But imagine that you were born, just say you were born at, I don't know, 10:30 in the morning, and that made Libra your rising sign. Well, if you were born an hour earlier, that would make Virgo your rising sign. And that would then become your first house. So that would then set things up very, very differently for you with regard to where the planets fall. And all based on the difference of 1 hour in birth time. Sometimes it's even down to a minute or a second that can make all the difference in the world. So this is why we need to know our birth times so accurately, especially in whole sign astrology. Because if we have Virgo as the rising sign, well, suddenly the moon falls in the third house, because this is our first. If that's where the rising ascendant is, this becomes the second, and then this becomes the third, and this becomes the fourth, and so on, all the way around. And we find that the planets will fall in completely different realms and have a completely different effect simply based on what sign is rising on the horizon. So it's very important to know your birth time so you can get your rising sign correct, and therefore you can make an accurate interpretation about the rest of your chart. So let's just, oh yes, we'll leave that as is. So this is how we can work with whole sign astrology, and this is the premise. Like I said, 0 degrees to 29 degrees is a whole sign, and that becomes your first house, second house, etc. Now, further to this, and let me just clean things up a bit here to make this explanation work. Okay, so further to this, we still have to determine some key points in the chart. So how I work, there's my Virgo rising sign. Let's straighten him up there. Okay, so let's say that I was born at 10:30 in the morning, and that made my ascendant in Virgo something like, I don't know, 5 degrees. 5 degrees of Virgo is my rising degree. Degree. But in whole sign astrology, we've got this. We've got this as our first house. Okay? So Virgo, the whole sign of Virgo is our first house. But then we also want to determine where the MC is going to fall. That's the midheaven point. And where the IC will fall, that is the lowest point in the horoscope. We also want to determine the AC and the DC. We want to determine the 5th house manifestation point and the 9th house manifestation point, and so on. This is how I work with division systems. So I hope I'm not confusing everybody by going into this. But I use a system of calculation called Campanus. Campanus is a space-based division system, and it's very different to the other systems of division that we can find in astrology, such as Placidus, which is a time-based system. And there's good astronomical reasons why I choose a space-based system over a time-based system, but again, that's something for a much more complex webinar down the track. However, a space-based system is a more accurate divisional system. And why I use Campanus is to tell me where manifestation points occur in the chart. Not house cusps like you would do if you wanted to just utilize Placidus system, but rather it tells me where a potential trigger for something to manifest in life might occur. So by utilizing Campanus system, and if you use astro.com for your calculations astrologically, you can choose Campanus. It's one of the selections that they offer. But we would use it, and it would help us determine where the AC-DC line is, and also say the MC line, which might run something like this. Like, what do we got here? Like this. So we might have these division lines, and that indicates at this point there's a manifestation point there in the chart, and there's a manifestation point there, and there's another manifestation point. And the ascendant, whenever we have anything crossing the ascendant, it's one of the most influential manifestation points that a person has. It's very personal and pertinent to them. So while I do utilize whole sign astrology, if you have a reading with me, and I hope you do at some point in time, I will be talking about whole sign astrology, but I may also mention manifestation points such as the MC and the IC and the DC, and I will most definitely be talking about the AC at some point, and there are others as well. In Western astrology, you'll find people talking about these points as house cusps, but I utilize very differently. I don't see them as house cusps. In whole sign astrology, a house cusp is where we have a change of sign. So changing from Libra to Scorpio, or from Scorpio to Sagittarius, or Sagittarius to Capricorn. These are whole sign house cusps. And if you use any type of divisional system with whole sign astrology, we're getting a little bit complex now, but you will essentially be creating a manifestation point, not a house cusp, if you're truly using whole sign astrology as it should be used. So that is how I work with whole sign astrology. I hope this hasn't been too confusing, and I hope it's given some clarity to the videos that I prepare for YouTube and the readings that I give to my clients and how I'm interpreting how things work. So thanks for joining me. I will have more astrological questions ready for you shortly, and I'll be sharing them to YouTube. So make sure you subscribe and follow, because I'd love you to join with me next week for another astrological question. Thank you.